everyone. You've probably heard this a lot of times, so I'll try and do it quicker. My name's Jesse White. I'm facilitating the session, facilitator for this session. Please make sure your cell phones are either off or on vibrate. PA-SAP and PAMLE, Approved Act 48, and social work credit. In order to receive it, you must be scanned at the end of the session. I'll stand here and scan everyone out at the end. You have to do the surveys within 5 days of the conclusion of the conference to receive credit, and this will also assist speakers in future conference planning. I'd like to introduce Michael D'Antonio and Samantha White, who will lead this session.
Thank you. What was this? What was the thing about scanning again, or 5? You need to do it within 5.
Yeah. Scan at the end. You want this shot or?
Yeah, because there's people snacking and stuff. Good morning, everyone. It's great to see you. Sam and I are going to talk to you a little bit today in the next hour or so about really 2 general things. How we utilize restorative practices in our 5 private academic licensed schools, and how we came about to introduce a blended learning model for those 5 schools. So that's kind of the combo. What will be different, although Sam says she was at some sessions that were not as unique as maybe we thought, is that we're not going to stand here and talk to you for an hour. So there's going to be some interaction. We're going to truly put you in some restorative model type scenes, blended learning situations where I go through a little bit of an introduction. Hopefully you'll see that as you go through this morning session. And like we do in all of our schools, at the end of classes, or at the end of the day, or at the end of a crisis, or at the end of something excellent that happened, we'll report out and we'll do checkouts and talk to each other about what we learned in our small group and work with questions back and forth. So that's the plan for us for the next hour. I am Dr. Michael D'Antonio. I am the Executive Director of Fluxmont Academy. We are 5, as I mentioned before, private academic licensed schools in the mid to southern eastern part of Pennsylvania, otherwise known as where the current Super Bowl champions reside. I know it's one. Those of you that are Pittsburgh fans will say, talk to us when you have at least 3. However, we're all one big happy commonwealth, and when we win one, you win one. That's not really true. And I'm a Ravens fan too, so that's really bad if you're a Steelers fan. Yeah. So anyway, our schools, and I'll just go over briefly what our setup is. We have schools in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, Woodland, which is southern Delaware County, Feasterville, and Sellersville, which are both in Bucks, I believe, northern Bucks and southern Bucks, and Pottstown, which is in Chester, Montgomery County. That's right. So our area of coverage, if you want to call it, probably touches upon maybe 80, 90 school districts. What happens is, for those of you that are in school districts, which is probably a lot of you, if not all of you, students come to us for placement for things that may have happened in your schools. And if you're in the administration or guidance or special education, you might know kind of how that all works. And what we do with kids in our area is we work with them in a restorative model. And part of that model, for a much longer period of time than I was involved, because I'm older than Sam, but because she's worked for the organization longer than I have. Sam White, who is going to introduce herself, was a teacher in that system and now serves as an instructional support specialist. Sam.
Well, that was a nice segue, thanks. So please refer me as Sam. I have been teaching now for 27 years. I have been in alt ed for 17 of those years. I love our students, they're fantastic. As Mike mentioned, I've been involved with restorative practices for most of that time. I actually graduated from the International Institute for Restorative Practices. I earned my master's there. So I've had a lot of experience working with restorative practices, and it's been a pleasure working with Mike the last couple of years and really just starting to bring a little bit more to our educational program. Our schools originally had a lot more of a therapeutic component to them, so at this point, we're really trying to up the ante, strengthen up the educational piece. We're bringing in a lot more tools, you know, for our teachers, bless you, and really just looking forward to move forward, you know, with what we're doing.
Yeah, and so to that end, what we have decided to do, made a decision a few years ago, is to change the format of what we were doing in a traditional kind of classes in the morning and a lot of, like Sam said, therapeutic counseling in the afternoon. The restorative model that we are a model program for, all 5 of our schools with the IIRP, is an intermingled throughout the day. It's really a blended model of how to use restorative practices. So that's what we are, not that we've implemented that a long time ago, but we're also now trying to increase our academic strength by using an online learning program, plus having our teachers there live for our kids that are also incorporating lessons and other blended learning things. So we're going to have you experience a little bit of that. Again, I don't know the level of, and it doesn't really matter, I don't know the level of understanding or awareness of restorative practices or the level or understanding of blended learning, but our hope is by the time we're finished today, you have a little bit of a taste for both and we can give you more information. We're also hoping, at least I know I am, and I'm sure Sam is too, that when we have the discussions and we make our way around the room while you're in your groups working on this assignment, and then when we're checking out towards the end, that we can get some information from you. Because I know there are people in this room that are using either blended learning models, you're teaching in a traditional school, you're teaching in a charter school, you're using online academics, online curriculum systems, not really sure. Maybe you're here for more information on how that can work with restorative practices, and we can give you that. It's a really good restorative model, and the communication process back and forth that we can kind of learn from each other. So I think that's a good way to do it.
Yep.
So let me talk a little bit about the social discipline window, and I'll spend a little bit of time on this in the beginning. For those of you that are familiar with restorative practices, you've taken courses, you've had training, you've had people from the IIRP come out, this is not at all an ad or a promo for that, not at all. But it's hard for us to talk about what we do and how we do it with the kids that you all send us and work with without talking about restorative practices, to give you a little bit of a breakdown. So if you are familiar with restorative practices, then you probably know what this looks like. Again, whether you've had training from IIRP or from some other organization, some of the thought process and the research behind what makes it work and why it is so effective, not just with kids, but with all kinds of groups and organizations. So the thing with, when people hear about restorative practices, one of the tendencies is that they think that it's very passive. And I teach a course and I hear students that are in my course say, one of the things that their administrators are looking for, or are more ways, not necessarily directly, but the community and the school board wants to different and more severe ways to punish kids, to really teach them a lesson about all of the things that they should be doing. And that's usually, again, not coming from administrators, but pressure from people from the outside. And I know since what happened 2 weeks ago, for a lot of you, because I know on the board for POSAP, we've talked about schools that haven't been open, have been closed a couple days or an entire week for all of the things that are going on in the community and in society. And as we all know, anything that's happened in society is making its way into schools and back and forth. So the most important part about this picture, I think, and thing to stress about either a blended learning model or whatever you're using in your school is the top right column, which is the width part. Restorative practices, if you look at what those two arrows are pointing to on the x-axis and the y-axis, you're looking at high support and high control. So the control part, I think, is the part that gets forgotten, or when a brief explanation of what restorative practices is doesn't really get emphasized. So it's not controlled discipline to the point where it's punitive, which is the 2 box. You think about somebody who's constantly, you're giving rules and regulations, and you're doing things to students or to people. You don't even have to include students in that. The other end would be low in control but high in support, and that's more permissive. When I think about these things and I talk about it with my students, I often think about teachers that I've had in the past, administrators that I've had in the past. I was a high school principal for a number of years, so I think about the people that I worked with, the superintendents I worked with, and no one is ever in one of these categories all the time. Maybe cartoon characters are, but no people on the planet for real are really in one of those areas. You kind of go through these different categories. You can be certain ways with your kids and your own, biological kids and your husband or your significant other or your relatives, parents, friends that you have, and you move from category to category. But I think what we try to focus on, because when kids come into our building, we're not spending a lot of time talking with them about the research behind restorative practices. We're talking about the implementation and what that looks like. That they see from us, from the person that's driving vans or helping to clean the ice off the sidewalk to people who are running the schools, the coordinators that are running the schools, working with you. So the kids that you send us that end up in our schools, their problems don't stop because they're now in a school with 7 or 8 kids in their class. Those behaviors are the things that we're working on and continue to work on. But now we're trying to up the ante as far as their academics, so that when we send them back to you, the hope is, what we're finding out is it's starting to show some results, that the kids are not falling so far behind, maybe even staying where they were. We have 2 students right now that are working on AP courses in our alternative school through our online learning. Actually, one of them finished in December or January, and another one was working a little bit, into the spring. So those are things that we would never have been able to do without an online blended learning model. I don't have teachers that are AP certified in my alternative ed schools, but I do through Ingenuity, which is the product that we're using for the curriculum. So back to the with our kids, that's what we're trying to do with their behaviors as we work with them, our teachers and our counselors work with them, and also with our academics. That you are responsible for your behaviors as students, you're responsible for your academics. We're not leaving you alone with a computer and saying, do your best, call me if you need me. We're providing certified teachers there in the classroom. In that one classroom, there could be 7, 8 kids taking a math class, and you're looking at 4 different levels of math. You could have 2 kids taking Algebra 1, a kid taking Algebra 2, a kid taking Geometry. The one boy I talked about last semester in the fall was taking AP Calc, I think. So as the teacher, you're not providing all that content, you're assisting the kids as they do that content on their online curriculum. And we're using restorative practices so that when we do have problems, either academically, using any of the devices of restorative practices, or behaviorally, that students start to learn what the process is and the routine is as we go through to solve those issues. You want to add anything to that?
Not really. I mean, the framework, this is just one concept that we use to explain restorative practices. And this is really the first thing that we teach folks about. It's so much easier to kind of look at, hey, am I holding up those expectations high, but am I also being supported? And how do you keep that balance? So I think that's important to note.
So another thing that is taught and talked about in restorative practices in any kind of training, and you may know this from other areas too. These are some of this is the continuum of the different practices that we use throughout the course of the day. And like you would think, things that are more informal, probably the first 3 up to maybe probably a circle, in our schools are going to be used every single day in some way, shape, or form. Formal conferences every once in a while, kind of depends on what the issue is, what the problem is. But what most people think about restorative practices and about these things is, because I think it's human nature to do this, you think about This is what you use if you're doing restorative practices in your school in a blended learning model or any learning model. These are what you use when there's a problem. And nothing could be further from the truth. That's true, but you're not really fully engaged in restorative practices in your school, building, whatever it is, if you're not using these same things when things are going really well. Or you're not using them, you should be using them for academic reasons. So you do circles, and you have, use affective statements and affective questions when you're talking about Romeo and Juliet in an English class. You use circles when you want to talk about pull everybody together, even though, as in my example, same thing would be in science, where you have a couple kids doing chemistry, a couple kids doing Bio 1, a couple kids doing general science. On their Edgenuity online curriculum, you stop them for a day and you do a lab that kind of incorporates all of those things, some basic things about lab work that would be important to know in chemistry or bio or general science, and you do a blended learning model lesson on that, and you use affective questions, or you use a circle to kind of describe what it is that the different steps of an experiment are, and ask questions related to that. The model to get to better communication for the kids are using these 5, and there's more, but these main 5 practices in the continuum. The bottom line, what you're really shooting for, is increased communication and building community. And whether you're using these things in good times and in bad, in sickness and in health, well, not till death do you part, because hopefully they don't stay that long. But you're using those things in all different parts of your day. And we did that in the past, where we just used a traditional curriculum that was really hard. I mean, think about that example. You have a certified, even math, you have a certified math teacher, and you'd say, oh my God, I only have 7 kids in my class. That's great. 7 all-ed kids. That's tough, but it's great. Some of you are teaching, you have 30, 33 kids in your class. But now you're teaching 3 or 4 different kinds of math. And even though you're math certified, and you're capable of teaching all of those, lesson plans for 4 subjects in one class. So the blended part is we have all of that provided with Edgenuity. What we're providing is the support and the person, the teacher who's certified in math, who is going to then do, have kids work in groups, which is very restorative and very community engaging. Have kids work one-on-one with each other. Stop the whole group and work and do a circle for that particular period to talk about some of the things that they're learning. Explain to another kid sitting across the room or in a different class period. Quadratic formula, what does that mean? Like, use the restorative questions when you didn't do well on a test. What happened? What were you thinking of at the time? Different things like that. So these are just a couple things that restorative practices support. We provide, and you think back to that square, the social discipline window. What we're trying to do is provide students the ability to do these things. And it's kind of not productive, but counterintuitive maybe is the right word. So what you're thinking about when you send kids, when kids are sent to an alternative ed program. So, like, we're not avoiding it. I'm not saying schools do either, because I remember not doing that, or at least trying not to do that. We're not avoiding the whole disciplinary process. We're empowering and providing, or trying to, with high control and high support, ownership for some of the things that are going on. Again, good and bad. Ownership for poor behavior, poor decision making. Ownership for great behavior and great decision making. Ultimately, in our schools, with the goal of getting back to your home school with those skills. Problem solving, decision making, healthier relationships, better self-awareness, and change. We sometimes, I shouldn't say we, I sometimes forget kids are coming in and coordinators are doing intakes and everybody's talking about this kid and I'm seeing this kid for the first time. If I stop in, I'm introducing myself or whatever, and I'm not thinking about the 6 or 7 other times that he or she's been suspended, maybe been in an all-ed school, maybe been to 3 or 4 schools over the course of their middle school, high school year, the other stuff that's going on in their lives, I'm not thinking about that right away. You guys are thinking about that all the time because you're living with it day in and day out. But we don't want to just hide things or brush things away. We want students to be able to learn the skills to be able to be self-sufficient, to be able to make better decisions as they go through. So combining that high level of support and that high level of control is what we're doing. And then we find sometimes that the students are doing that too, utilizing that. That's really amazing when you see in our schools, kids like confronting each other in a very positive way about their behaviors.
You made that up, actually. Okay. In 15 minutes, you have been given a very small nutshell about restorative practices. So we're not expecting folks to leave here with a great grasp of it, but at least some basic knowledge of it. As I mentioned to you before, our education program was really lacking for quite some time, and our aim over the past 2 years was really just how do we boost it up, how do we really improve it. When we were reading about blended learning and learning about it and how do we bring this to our environment, because it is very unique from a lot of your environments, we really wanted to make sure to have a program that's going to encapsulate a lot of this. Okay? So we're going to have you actually, instead of us standing here and talking to you about blended learning, we're going to have you conduct an activity. I'm going to need you to break into maybe small groups of maybe 4 to 5 people. And we're going to have you do an activity, and you will teach us what you've learned about blended learning. So I'm going to ask you to maybe cluster up however you wish around the room. Hi.
It would be helpful if we didn't. I'm just going to computer. Go ahead.
You're going to need some kind of a device. Laptop, like has people stuff. You are going to need your devices. You can use either your laptop, Chromebook, phone, whatever the case. Up here in the center, right above the eagle, is a tiny little address, which is going to give you the instructions. But as a group, you're going to be given a total amount of time of 20 minutes to decide how you're going to break up this assignment, give yourself enough time to do the research, and then have some time to come together as a group, as a small group, to discuss your findings. Okay? I'm going to wait a moment for folks to log in. Is there anyone having a problem? Yeah. I'm sorry?
You just need a
Okay,
minute
sure,
for it.
no worries. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about the assignment. Once you're all logged in, you're going to want to, as a group, decide to have a team leader and a timekeeper. You're going to have a total of 20 minutes. I think that should be suffice. In that 20 minutes, and again, as a group, decide how you're going to break up your time, how are you going to break up the assignments in there. And as a group, you're going to research as a whole, and then come together and use discussion questions that are on that activity sheet. Okay. Any questions? Yes?
What does it look like when we get there?
It looks like
It should look like a set of
It
instructions.
looks like a sheet with a set of
Is there anyone
instructions.
who does not have something that says playlist at the top?
You got it. You got it. Okay.
Are there any questions? Does everybody have a group? This group is spread out.
We're covering it.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, need a little help, introductions, I can do that. Okay? So if we're okay to start, I'm going to give you warning at the halfway point, at 5 minutes, and then at 1 minute. Okay? So please begin. Mike and I will float around if you have any questions.
I can read it too.
All right, I'm gonna say the first one. That first video.
No, I don't care. Under learning in a nutshell. I'm gonna do the Under learning in a nutshell. That's the second one.
Okay.
Or the third one.
Yeah, you got the third one. You got the first one. Oh, wow. So I know it's gonna be like. was impressed. I read the article. Yeah, I think right next to the topic
I just think that would, I will probably, what's your form?
So that's just to let you know, it's about the halfway point in that 20 minutes, so you have about 10 minutes left.
Do you want me to add to this? Yeah, exactly. If you need anything else.
Yeah, how are you? Okay. Yeah, exactly. Are you central? Yeah. Okay. What do you work on? Okay. Right.
Well, there's a lot of charts.
What's your video? Just but now they can take it.
They talked about surveying the teachers and students.
I don't know what to do, but
The teachers felt
my wife is
on the pace. The students felt the class was smaller. Even though
I
saving things about it.
So is there a doc that's?
So the video or the article?
That was the video, yeah.
The video is short, just compared it to
Yeah, the other one.
high school, which is good. It's like strawberries. Put them together. It's better.
Efficiency money.
Sure, well, mine was, it's an easy way for that to define keys, successful blended learning, and then went over them all. And so it says, first, the organization to define what your academic goal is, what they're going to look at, allow with the system. Two, then, help teachers understand their role, because all teachers have to be supportive of this initiative. Three, then the initiative towards the needs of all students, because it meets them all at varied levels. Four, anticipate pushback, which is different than what parents have experienced with their kids, with their own education. So anticipate many meetings and discussions like examples. And then five, innovate and adapt the program over time. So always be looking forward and making changes.
That one particular class, the rest of the day.
So my video was really short, but in a nutshell, I guess is what it was. Yeah, blended learning in a nutshell. So just to talk about how a blend or mixed space talk about ways to use the online some portion of it to maybe inform identify what level instruction talks about the benefits for the students, having choice control where they interact with the tasks, etc. Where and when. Obviously, the online content is interactive, like you were saying, more interactive, more interesting. Students these days try to get technology, and then one concern is safety and monitoring content, private. Pretty much every platform here.
No, it's about 4 or 5 minutes.
Am I gonna get away from all
That's the biggest thing I was going to say, but things right on the level of the
If they're on technology, because we track
He doesn't do that.
and really getting teachers to use these like you said, it's not just, oh yeah, I'm using it, they have this worksheet online. Right. So that's just traditional, just put it on your, put it in this format. You know, not just using technology, like showing the worksheet on your smartphone. Yes, that is technically using technology.
Great, thank you. We're on the last question. Yep, they're finished. Good.
Teach all the different levels.
I think we have 2 groups that are just finishing up, so we're going to give you another minute.
Well, one thing I've been saying is we know one at high school, and we just started it in late October, early November. So I'm trying to think of how I can use text during my faculty. I like the model of using the one concept, really teach them to understand, and then we'll do what I should.
Oh, you did.
Figure out a way to put my background.
That's what I was thinking too. The more it's just, I mean, when you kind of stand for teachers.
No, I was gonna not like to see the
Force to act, that kind of thing. Try to implement that in organizations.
So I think
A
we're
lot
all,
of times I'll be going to teachers like, hey, teach me how to use it.
I think that's the thing we often do bad, if we talk about differentiation and not just saying they're talking to everybody, and then that can, we fall into the trap of standing and talking to everybody about the exact same thing. So how can I challenge myself to do what's really trying should be done?
We don't need the students thinking anymore. No offense, anyway, stop the saying.
Is there any group that's not finished, not to create like a moment of embarrassment here? Is everybody pretty much wrapped up?
Oh, yeah, you're
I like those, thank you. So I'm going to ask each group just to report maybe one thing that you learned about blended learning in general, or something specific that you learned from it. Can I start with this group over here? If that's okay? And whoever wants to report back is fine. Take it.
I did, I took a lot of notes. I like the idea of the blended model allows, it gets the student to focus on skill and practice, and allows the teacher to work more on the depth as a subject area expert, rather than making the kids do the drill.
Thank you. Could you go to this group, please?
Yeah, we ended up, our discussion took a little turn towards like what we're already doing. So it was interesting to hear some of the things that, you know, based on the readings and the videos, like, oh, we're kind of already doing, dabbling in some of this, and kind of sharing some of those experiences.
Thank you. Background, please.
One of the things that we focused on was the ability to differentiate for students through this model better than you can do in a traditional classroom setting. So that was one of the key things that we focused on.
Thank you. Joe?
We like the where they surveyed the teachers and the students, and they kind of talked about their thoughts about the model. And I like that the students were saying they felt like their classes were smaller, even though in reality they're not necessarily. But you get more of that individual learning. The teacher said the classroom management was easier, which is always a nice perk, I guess. And they just easier time differentiating, they said, and they can work at their own pace. And they said the students really appreciated the instant feedback. Sometimes in a regular classroom, it's hard to go around and tell them, give them that instant feedback that they like. So,
along with like the acquisition of data that you can receive. The acquisition of data, just because of the numbers that are affected.
Great, thank you.
So we kind of took a similar approach to that group. Like we started thinking about things we do. We actually have Ingenuity at our district, but we do not use it. We use it strictly just for cyber students at home. But I know Ms. Turley talked about some of these things we do. We're a one-to-one school, so all of our students have iPads. So she does incorporate things, lessons, and then helps students on the side. So very similar. But one thing I did like about the videos is just talking about having different grade levels and then tailoring your groups per grade level or their content area that they're struggling in.
Thank you.
We talked about student engagement. We also thought it was important that the teacher has more time to concentrate on concepts that kids aren't able to master on their own. So more detailed in depth.
Thank you.
I think we'd probably just repeat everything. We found 9 benefits, which sometimes we had a little bit of a debate over here about what, that might look like. But we ended up talking about how we didn't call it blended learning, but some of the ways that we're targeting kids with skills and practice, especially with, differentiating for students within our classroom, kids who are, not kind of the outliers of the group. So that kind of is where our conversation was headed. But everything else, everyone's pretty much set, I think. Anybody have anything else?
Thank you. Are there other points that didn't come up? And just kind of open it up to the room. Any other points that came up that you didn't get to make? No. How was the process for folks? How was the actual process of, and I realize a lot of you may not know each other, so you had to do some quick introductions and, you know, get established as a group, but how was the actual process, following those directions, you know, taking the lead in your own learning? How was it for you? Yes, sir.
Yeah, it felt good because, you know, you originally see that and you go, wow, 4 videos or whatever it was, there's a couple articles, but hey, I only had to do 1/3 of the work. You know, that was pretty nice.
Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Currently, I'm like in a master's certification program in Cal U, and it's very similar, and it's like, it's nice being able to like see everything, organize your time. It's really nice, and I say that about our students too. We do that. We have something called Power School, which organizes all the assignments so the students can see the week. I think it definitely reduces a lot of anxiety for kids, especially if they're in sports or have some other things going on at home, where they're able to plan their week. And we really try to work on that in the middle school, like really teaching them how to plan and allocate their time, because we know that that's important for not only school, but for the rest of their life. So I definitely see the benefits of that.
Thank you. Who else?
I'm just curious if anybody has suggestions, because I personally am trying to, I'm a middle school math teacher. Our district, I mean, budget across the state, we all know is terrible, but getting curriculum, like I'm building everything myself from scratch. So for me to try blended, like I'm flipping one classroom at a time.
Right.
But are there ways to get resources, like to flip my instruction? I'm building the whole online curriculum, which then, you know,
It's a
like you're
lot.
talking about different
Right.
programs. So is that kind of the tradition, like the kind of program to put them on? Or is it the expectation that teachers are building that curriculum? Like, what's the expectation for that, I guess?
I'm actually going to open that up to the room as well, because we have a whole mix of folks. Why don't you call in folks?
Okay.
We utilize Khan Academy a lot,
Yeah.
for that kind of stuff,
That's how I started. I started using Khan Academy, and the kids, I found that when I make my own videos, they're a lot more receptive to my own videos, which is like I'm making videos during lunch and plan and after school and last night in the hotel room, and then the link was blocked this morning. Anyway.
Our math teacher does the flipped classroom. He doesn't have a textbook, and our ELA teacher is doing it for certain things, doesn't do no textbook either. But what he does is he has some kind of a workbook, and he can record himself, and he's teaching it, but what the kids are seeing is right. It's similar to Khan Academy, but the kids have to fill in the workbook and do the problems, and then when they come to class, they work on problems, and if somebody's having issues, then he can focus on them. But he has a YouTube channel. This is where he publishes everything, and the kids go to his YouTube channel, and that's where they can see it.
And that's, YouTube is blocked in our district, so I have to, I go through Google Classroom. And that was the issue that I had this morning. It was blocked.
They need restorative practices on that.
That was a good one.
We're actually we create our own curriculum at Central Valley, so we do teams like K through 12, and our math teacher is using Engage in New York.
Okay.
So I don't know, those are, it's free,
Yeah.
and it's online to the Common Core. So, yeah, they make their own videos
They
too.
do that too.
They have the kids watch the videos at home and they answer questions, and they come in, and then the teacher can start the lesson
She does notes as well.
with it.
When we're done, if you want her email, I'll give it to you, because she's really doing a good job in that. They, 2 of them are, they're vetting it this year, and it's working really well with the kids doing the notes and watching the videos at home. And then they turn it into their notes we have Shobi, which is where we get, what do you call that?
That's like our sharing, where we share, they submit their work.
And, so and then that's what she checks, and that they've done that, and that they've done examples, so that she starts each class with the assumption that they've done the background work, and she can not spend all that time.
And they created the videos too, so that the kids don't need internet access at home. So they've
Right,
done something with it, so that, so that's not a barrier for the students.
I would also, sorry, go ahead, and then I'll go next.
Yeah, do you have other math teachers that teach your same content, or are you the only one?
Nope, I'm the only one.
Oh, okay. Then never mind, I had
That's
another
not PG
suggestion.
in algebra.
I was just, and I liked all the comments that came through. I would suggest there are a lot of forums online sort of like a professional learning community that you can get involved with. As a teacher myself, the last couple of days, a lot of online resources available that are free that you can put to use. So I would check out the conference handouts and resources just to make sure of that. Okay, so one point that I do want to make, and Mike talked earlier about restorative practices, he was talking about the processes up there, using affective statements, circles, things like that. Just like with blended learning, it's not automatically the process that's going to make it restorative, it's really how you engage your folks. So, sitting here, you could have certainly made the decision to just be in your own little box, do your own notes, and not talk to each other. But you were empowered to be able to make the decisions, by saying to you that, hey, you're the team leader, choose somebody within your group, decide how you're going to break up the materials. That's a big piece of it. It also creates that sense of ownership. If you've got the stakeholders all involved, whether that be your class of students or meeting with teachers after school, with your own departments, setting up a professional learning community, you're creating a lot of ownership, and it creates that passion, enthusiasm. One thing that we've had to struggle with our school in the past year and a half, and I was just talking to someone earlier, was teacher buy-in. We're kind of throwing all these really neat things going on, but if you don't have that buy-in, it's not going anywhere. So how do you engage the teachers? So we've used a lot of just asking them, hey, how are things working? What do you need? We've created mini trainings last year because we had teachers who were not feeling like they were getting enough information on Edgenuity, which was our new learning management system. So you always want to just keep in mind, it's that how piece, how to be restorative, because all of this will come about as long as you're keeping in mind of setting those expectations and creating the support for your students, both in restorative practices and in blended learning. What am I missing that you would like to add?
I would just say, because it evolves, and I think in a lot of sessions that happened this past 3 days, this is what happens. We're all we have, when you think about it. So anytime that we do a session or you're walking around, and all of the camaraderie and just being together for 3 days is all great, but isolation kills. When you think that you are, maybe the only person that has this issue or this, that, but what about this or that, and someone else is explaining something, you're hearing stuff that we're saying that you're saying, that's not a problem for us, so I hear it, but it's not really, but then other things are, oh my God, I never thought of that. It's somebody saying that if I can give you the name and the number and the phone and an email address of somebody that I'm working with that had a similar problem, the back and forth. Our hour's almost up already. So what is important, I think, for us is to be able to share this information with you, but even more importantly, that we're not talking to you or at you, but working with you for this hour so that can continue. You get up from here and you get checked out and you run into, not a lot of time left today, I understand, but you run into somebody, grab a soda or whatever to go to your next session, connect with the person that across the room here said, I can give you a name or a phone number or a website or this or that, because you go searching for all of these things and you might get lucky and find something, but you have people here that have tried things and it's worked for them and it might work for you too.
We do have
I just wanted to pose a question to the room. We were talking about what they use for math and language arts. The two resources address those topics. But what about for science? Do you have any that you recommend? I saw Khan Academy, when I quickly looked it up, did have some science resources. I wanted to see what everybody else is doing. Because I've never, I have shown some of my honor students like dissection videos ahead of time so they know what to expect when they came in and when we did it. But I haven't really adopted the flipped classroom model.
So I'm going to open it up again to the floor. Science resources. I'm sorry?
There's a site called Gizmos, Gizmos. They have some free online simulations, but then you can also purchase for like the whole shebang for like $40. So we don't really have a lab, so it's nice. It's nice to have an online simulation for the lab and pretend like you're mixing chemicals together and you don't have them.
I teach physical science for the first 3 months and then biological sciences.
And PhET simulation, PhET Simulation, yeah, PHET, they also do a bunch of online simulations.
I think it's called SciFlix, it's a Scholastic product. SciFlix, they're like little videos. I don't know if our district has to pay for that. I get a login, but I don't know if it's a free login or not. Something like that.
He's not laughing at you, I'm sorry, I just told him I had a good idea for next year, that's all. I was like, we should set up cohorts.
Yeah, we do love video clips in school.
Any other questions before we have to throw you out, unfortunately, because it's time? I don't want you in trouble.
No one wants to
I'm
yell
a
huzzah.
rule follower.
No one wants to yell huzzah because it looks like the British Parliament. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Jesse will scan you on the